Hey, did you know that Jesus once battled a dragon? Did you know that when Jesus was 5 years old, he started killing some kids in his neighborhood? Did you ever read the apology letter that Pontius Pilate sent to King Herod and that affirmed that Jesus truly was the Son of God? I bet you got no idea what I'm talking about, right? Those heresies that I just went over, they had their own scriptures too. After all, those heresies were believed by many Christians, so it is obvious that they would have their own scriptures to support it. Now, these scriptures are not part of our canon. Canon are the books that we use to measure our faith against. These are the books that are considered normative for our faith, aka what we believe. Talked about this a long time ago, back in Unit 1. There are plenty of Gospels and other scriptures that were floating around during the time of the formation of the canon. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were not the only Gospels to choose from. There were, hundreds of Gospels by the time our canon was formed around the 3rd and 4th centuries. And the Catholic Church had to determine which of these scriptures do we consider true, both in faith, both in morals, but also we actually believe to an extent Jesus did these things. The books that didn't make the cut, the books that were rejected from our canon, are called apocryphal, not apocalyptic. Apocalyptic refers to end of the world. Apocryphal is Greek for left out. And you can easily Google these books. This isn't some we left them out and then we burned every manuscript trying to suppress the truth of who Jesus was. Church doesn't care if you know it. As a religious studies student, I study this stuff in Catholic universities. You got to know they exist, and you can match these books up with the heresies that we just studied. They're fun to look at, and in a course on who is Jesus, I think it's worth the time to take a moment to look and see who Jesus is not. Let me read off to you just kind of a random sample of what we're talking about when it comes to apocryphal scripture. In alphabetical order, the Acts of Andrew, the Acts of John, Acts of Paul, Acts of Thomas, of Peter, Arabic Infancy, Berlin Discourse of St. John, I can't pronounce that one. Gospel of Nicodemus, Gospel of Matthew, Gregory of Tours, Letters of Christ and Agatha, Letters of Pilate and Herod, the narrative of Joseph of Arimathea, Proto-Evangelium of James, Pseudo-Titus. And that's just a sample. What I want to do now is read to you an excerpt from the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas is a lot of fun.
We're going to have fun.
What a lot of these apocryphal scriptures tried to do was fill in the blanks on the details of Jesus' younger life. A lot of early church officials, and even us today, often wonder what was it that Jesus did when he was younger. These infancy narratives are an attempt to tell that story. But here's what's brilliant about these infancy narratives. They take what we know about adult Jesus from the canonical Gospels, and they take those symbols, they take the actions, the theology of adult Jesus, and they move it into scenarios when Jesus is a child.
Brilliant.
Kind of like what the TV show Smallville did to adult Superman. When this boy Jesus was 5 years old, he was playing at the crossing of a stream, and he gathered together into pools the running water, and instantly made it clean, and gave his command with a single word. Sounds a lot like baptism, right? Having made soft clay, he molded from it 12 sparrows, and it was the Sabbath when he did these things. And there were also many other children playing with him. When a certain Jew saw what Jesus was doing while playing on the Sabbath, he at once went and told his father Joseph, "See, your child is at the stream," and he took clay and molded 12 birds and has profaned the Sabbath. And when Joseph came to the place and looked, he cried out to him, saying, "Why do you do on the Sabbath things which is not lawful to do?" But Jesus clapped his hands and cried out to the sparrows and said to them, "Be gone!" And the sparrows took flight and went away chirping. And the Jews were amazed when they saw this, and went away and told their leaders what they had seen Jesus do. What sounds like adult Jesus? Besides the baptism, of course, the water being made clean, Jesus takes 12. He molds 12 sparrows and sends them out.
My little sparrow is dying.
Greek word to be sent out, apostle. Jesus chooses 12 apostles and sends them out. Also, who is angry with Jesus? A certain Jew. It was often the Jewish people, as you know, trying to uphold the purity system that challenged Jesus. Jesus is doing work on the Sabbath, which is something he got accused of doing as an adult when he was healing on the Sabbath. Jesus performs his miracle, and people are amazed. Not all the stories are as pleasant. Now the son of Annas the scribe was standing there with Joseph, and he took a branch of a willow, and with it dispersed the water which Jesus had collected. When Jesus saw what he had done, he was angry and said to him, "You insolent, godless ignoramus." He's 5 years old. "What harm did the pools and the water do to you? Behold, now you shall wither like a tree, and shall bear neither leaves nor root nor fruit." And immediately that child withered up completely. And Jesus departed and went into Joseph's house. But the parents of the boy who was withered carried him away, bemoaning his lost youth, and brought him to Joseph and reproached him. "What kind of child do you have who does such things?"
What kind of an ending is that?
There's something I learned about Jesus in these apocryphal Gospels of Thomas, is that you don't mess with Jesus' water. That could be a theological statement about the saving nature of water. You don't defile water. So this little bratty kid disperses Jesus' water, and Jesus is very, very angry and curses that kid. He makes him wither so that he shall not produce any fruit.
I don't like this ending.
What story does that sound like? Jesus cursing the fig tree in the Gospel of Mark. We've already talked about the fig tree as a traditional symbol of Judaism. And he tells the fig tree, "You shall never produce fruit." So you can assume this son of Annas the scribe was a Jew. And here's Jesus again cursing the Jews, making them wither up, just like adult Jesus did in one gospel. Matthew made it a parable, so it's not as offensive. It gets worse. After this, he again went through the village, and a child ran and knocked against his shoulder. Jesus was angered and said to him, "You shall not go further on your way." And immediately he fell down and died. But some who saw what took place said, "From where was this child born, since his every word is an accomplished deed?" And the parents of the dead child came to Joseph and blamed him, and said, "Since you have such a child, you cannot dwell with us in the village. Teach him to bless and not to curse, for he is killing our children." Yeah, okay, Jesus is a brat. But what I find interesting about this story is that the people keep going to Joseph. Where's Mary? In our scriptures, usually it's Mary who's the person who's around. But in this case, it's Joseph, which is not actually Jewish culture. Jewish culture typically left the child rearing for the mom. In Roman culture, it's the father who disciplines that son.
Not the mama, not the mama.
The father needs to say, "You lack discipline!" And Joseph is tasked with the responsibility of teaching Jesus to bless and not to curse. Jesus responds with some philosophical answer, again, still 5 years old, and this catches the attention of a teacher named Zacchaeus. Here's what's fun about the Zacchaeus story. This Zacchaeus story says, "Joseph, your son is very wise. Bring him to me. I'm going to teach him the alphabet. He's already a smart kid, and we'll get this kid squared away. We'll take care of this, Joseph." So what happens with poor Zacchaeus is that Zacchaeus teaches Jesus everything from Alpha to Omega. He's teaching the alphabet. He's teaching from A to Z. And what happens is that Jesus stands up and tells the teacher, "Teacher, how dare you teach me Z when you do not fully comprehend A?
How dare you, sir?
First, understand A, all the workings of A. Then you can teach me Z, you hypocrite." And at that point, Jesus stands up, probably goes to like a blackboard, and starts drawing the letters, Alpha through Omega. And he starts literally explaining every stroke of every letter. Wow, again, as a preschool kid, Jesus is just annoying. And what you're left with is a really fun monologue that Zacchaeus responds to Jesus with. "This child is not earthborn. He can even subdue fire. Perhaps he was begotten even before the creation of the world." Sounds like the Gospel of John's prologue. What belly bore him? What womb nurtured him? I do not know. Woe is me, my friend. He confuses me. I cannot attain to his understanding. I have deceived myself, thrice wretched man that I am. I desired to get a pupil, and I have found I have a teacher. My friends, I am filled with shame that I, an old man, have been defeated by a child. This teacher is losing his stuff. I'll read to you one more. Now after some days, Jesus was playing in the upper story of a house, and one of the children who were playing with him fell down from the house and died. And when the other children saw it, they fled, and Jesus remained alone. Right there, what does that sound like? Sounds like when Jesus was in trouble in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he was in that agony, and people kept falling asleep. It sounds like when Jesus was on the cross, and no one was at the foot of the cross. It sounds like when people were questioning the followers of Jesus, are you with Jesus? And no one was found. When Jesus is in trouble, nobody ever seems to stick around. He's very much abandoned. The parents of the one who was dead came and accused him, but they threatened him. Then Jesus leaped down from the roof and stood by the corpse of the child and cried with a loud voice, Zeno! For that is what he was called. Arise and tell me, did I throw you down? And he arose at once and said, No, Lord, you did not throw me down, but raised me up. And when they saw it, they were amazed. And the parents of the child glorified God for the sign that had happened and worshipped Jesus. Kind of like the raising of Lazarus. Lazarus is Jesus' friend. But what's interesting about the Lazarus story and how it contrasts to this story is that when Jesus raises Lazarus in the Gospel of John, he's doing it out of compassion. How we know that? See previous episode, but compassion has 3 steps: see, feel, and do. And in the Lazarus story, Jesus sees the despair on everyone's face. And it says he feels deeply. How John writes that, it says that Jesus wept. It's the shortest verse in all of Scripture. Jesus wept. Feel. And then what does he do? He brings Lazarus back to life. Jesus' raising of Lazarus was an act of compassion, as is most of the miracles that Jesus performs in all the Gospels. In this case, why does Jesus raise Zeno back from the dead? To get out of trouble, which is something adult Jesus doesn't do. In Luke's Gospel, Herod Antipas says, Jesus, I'll let you go free if you walk across my swimming pool, if you turn my water into wine. Jesus refuses. Jesus is mocked when he's on the cross, and they say, why don't you jump off that cross? Jesus doesn't do it. But here's young Jesus, 5-year-old Jesus, raising Zeno, because Zeno's parents think that Jesus killed him. I wonder how they got that impression. Apocryphal literature is a lot of fun to read. You need to understand, of course, it's not canon, it's not history. Our faith is not based off of it. But as we're exploring who is Jesus, it's fun to think about who Jesus was definitely not. If I can make a recommendation for you, watch the National Geographic documentary on the Gospel of Judas. The Gospel of Judas was recovered a number of decades ago, but it was recently translated within the last 10 years. And it's a Gnostic gospel. And in the Gospel of Judas, Jesus goes to Judas and says, Judas, you, as my right-hand man, need to betray me, because I want to be liberated from this earth. Remember, Gnostics thought that the earth was evil, created by an evil God.
But it's true.
And Jesus sought liberation from this earth. And he told Judas, you will be the most prized angel in heaven if you do this. And with much hesitance, Judas does it, and the Gospel of Judas comes to an end. It's called the Gospel of Judas, not that it was written by Judas, but because it focuses on this character of Judas following Jesus' will. It's a totally different spin on, of course, the passion and the betrayal, but it puts Jesus in control, and the motivation is liberation, which is what the Gnostics taught. No death scene, no resurrection scene, because the Gnostics didn't believe in resurrection, and I guess everyone knows the story that Jesus died. A lot of great stuff. Check it out. Type in apocryphal scripture on the internet. Thomas is a lot of fun. Jesus battles the dragon in Pseudo-Matthew. Pontius Pilate writes Herod a letter. It's some cool stuff. Check it out.
Friends to know and ways to grow. A reading